so more than half a year. So that is the, related back to the call for new liberal arts, in the afternoon opening session. So I just, very briefly, I introduced the background to someone who is new to this session. So probably I just have a recap, okay, of the background of this project. Okay, so Dongbing, would you mind making sure so everybody in our group here? Okay, so I'm going to share my slide first. Okay, wait a moment. So sharing the screen. Seen it?
Yes.
Okay, so that is comparing discipline and the aspects of knowledge building. So the main contents, so very briefly with the background. Sorry, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? Okay, the background of this project and also the call and reply. And then the motivation for the comparison between linguistics and literary law, economics, and chemistry. And then very briefly with our panel plan. So if I have time, so I will talk very briefly about the knowledge, the aspects of knowledge building. So when we finish this part, we move on to my part, that is the definitions in different discipline and make an interpretation in terms of semantics. So very briefly, with the background of this project, so as I had mentioned in the opening remarks, so now in China we have about 1,000 tertiary institutions, offering the English programs, so with about 200,000 graduates every year. So, but in 2018, when we are celebrating the 40th anniversary of reform and opening up, so we have that debate about the English as a major. So someone think it is out of fashion, if you are learning English for the English sake. So that means you are learning, the English literature, such as the English poems, so the short stories, so, and the Elizabethan, novels, okay, something like that. So probably a way, to, the future of the English program is the English plus another major. Okay, as I have mentioned, the business, economics, the finance, law, and the political sciences. So a fact is that a lot of students, okay, are opting, opt for the double major. Okay, so they learned English and they also learned another, professional, not the professional, that is the academic discipline. Okay, in order to be more competitive, okay, in the future job market. So yes, so the year before last year, so we have that declaration on the construction of the new liberal arts. So I don't think it is new if we take the global, perspective. So as summarized in Milton and Harvard, so knowledge must be brought together. So it is quite pervasive, in today's education. So a desire to integrate diverse knowledge practices appears almost everywhere. So they think, the problems can only be solved if we, have that interdisciplinary collaboration. Okay, so our reply to the call. So as the findings in Merton and Harvard show, simply bring together the diverse knowledges together. Bring together diverse knowledges is not enough. So what should we do? What can we do? Okay, to make this bring together more meaningful and more significant. So a very quick answer to that is knowing before doing. So it is our a proposition that a proposal that understanding of each disciplinary knowledge prioritize the pedagogical doing. So that leads to, okay, we take the linguistics as a bridging discipline. So we make a comparison between the linguistics and literary theory, linguistics and the law, linguistics and economics, and the linguistics and chemistry. So I will do the first one, Professor Yuan and his team, including Dr. Xu, Mr. Xu, and Ms. Fu, will do the comparison between the linguistics and the law, the studies of law. And most of them being the same person, not two, okay? We'll compare linguistics with economics. So unfortunately, Zhigang, okay, cannot make the presentation, personally. So, but we have the video. So Zhigang will make the comparison between linguistics and chemistry. So it is our panel plan. Okay, so mainly I will focus on the definitions in linguistics, literary theory, law, economics, and chemistry. So the dimensions. So I want to employ both specialization and semantics. In our group rehearsal, I have already introduced the semantics dimension. So probably I just focus on the specialization. So Professor Yuan and his team, we will do, the comparison, in the following three aspects. That is illustration in linguistics and the law, technical terms in linguistics and the law, sequencing tool in linguistics and law. So mainly from with reference to the dimension of semantics. Dongbing will do it in terms of objects of study and approaches in linguistics and economics. The dimension is a specialization. And Zhigang, we will do the formalism in linguistics and chemistry. So the dimension is that of semantics. Okay, so those topics, okay, relates to the aspects. Okay, we can make reference to when we compare one discipline with another. So we group those aspects into 4 categories. The first one is object of study and approaches. So that is the job by Dongbing, and the theory building and the development. So we focus on one of them, that is the definition. So with the discursive presentation, so the multimodality and the wording and the modality. So that is a job by Professor Yuan's team. Okay, and unfortunately, we haven't, got enough, talents in conducting, in doing the last one. That is a newer concerns. Okay, so now I have my 15 minutes to do the disciplinary definition. Okay, first. I will introduce the distinction between the disciplinary and ontological definition, and then I will talk about the functions of a disciplinary definition, the system network for definition, and the classification of disciplinary definition. And lastly, I think I will make a specialization interpretation of disciplinary definition. As I mentioned, I have already presented the semantic interpretation to my group. So I want to do something new. So in a paper published in 2011, so Merton made it clear. So, as far as knowledge building is concerned, so, it is quite controversial to have the distinction between theories and themes. So, if we take the knowledge as structural entity, I put forward these 5 levels. Each relate to the one above it in the relation of a composition. So we can see these are the ranks or the levels of the theoretical construction. So at the first level, I have the distinction between disciplinary definition and ontological definition. The disciplinary definition is a definition that defines the discipline. Okay, simple enough. While the ontological definition, it is a definition that defines the object of a study. So that is the first level. So for the disciplinary definition, so it will be supported by the branch definitions. For example, the linguistics, we have the phonology, the phonetics, and the syntax. A lot of consisting concept. Okay, so yes, so these 5 levels. So, the disciplinary and the ontological definitions are at the first level. So the functions of a definition, several scholars, have gave a detailed discussion of the functions of a definition. So, just the 2 of them here. I have LCT interpretation of these functions. As far as epistemic function is concerned, we can see the disciplinary definition works to clarify the boundary of the discipline, to serve as umbrella term for interdisciplinary conceptual constellation, and to provide a summary statement about the object of study, and to clarify the relationship with the other disciplines. So the subjective function probably it will preserve and communicate the disciplinary knowledge among the peer knowers, to build the academic community. So that is a function. So it is very important for us to study the variations or the disciplinarities of the definition. So with the types of definition, so the first complete list was made by Robinson in 1950. So he gave a list of 18, types of definition, but it is a list. But I don't think it is a classification because those terms, were put forward by different scholars. So there are some overlappings, okay, with that. So the one, I think, so it is the, quite, give a quite a strict and also comprehensive definition by Pep in 1964. So according to him, we have 2 points of view in classifying the definition. So on the basis of the classification proposed by Pep, I gave this, system network, the researchers in the field of LCT, access LCT via a systemic functional linguistics. So we are, prone to use a system network to present, okay, the classification. So the first level distinction is that between epistemological and the formal. Epistemological means, the nature of the statement. So the distinction is that between, proposal and the proposition. So the proposal is referred to as a stipulative, definition. That is, it is a term. It is what I mean by using the term. Okay, you must follow my rule. Okay, I give the definition. That is a stipulative. While the propositional, okay, it can be verified. So in addition to these two, we have a third choice, that is the precising. So the precising definition is a combination of a stipulative and the propositional definition. So according to the theory of a concept by Wittgenstein, all the categories, have prototypical members, and also some cases in the both lines. For example, if we see we have a large audience, so how to define large? In our context, if I see, if we have more than 30 participants, we see it is a large audience. Okay, so that is my definition. So yes, so it is a kind of to the fact. So that is the precising is a combination of the two. While the propositional definition, have two simultaneous systems. One is that between empirical, the other is analytical. The second one, if you're familiar with the semantic triangle, you know the distinction among symbol, the referent, and the concept. Okay, so if it is empirical, so it can be verified. We have the data to verify. Okay, the definition. If it is analytical, we do not have the way to do that. Okay, it is logical. If the premise is true, so the reasoning must be true. So that is analytical. So as for the second, system, so that is the definition can be made by giving examples. Okay, it can also be a quite a general one. The exemplifying definition can be referred to as the denotative definition, while the general definition is the connotative definition. So the exemplifying can be further divided into ostensive. So this is a desk. Okay, so it is ostensive. It can also be non-ostensive, to give a lot of illustrations or detailed examples to show what it means. The general definition can be further divided into explicit and the contextual. The contextual definition is the definition of the terms in a relationship to another. Okay, for example, the definition of a husband and a wife, that is the relational antonym, right? So if you want to make it clear the meaning of one word, you need to make reference to another. So what we are focusing on is here. So I just studied the 5 disciplinary definitions. So we find that mainly they make choices. Okay, as far as epistemological definition is concerned, the choice of empirical is combined with the concept. Well, if we are classifying it in terms of formal criteria, mainly we are using disjunctive and this genus plus difference. Okay, I'm going to show you what is it. Okay, so these are the discipline and the definition. So the chemistry. So that is the study of the properties and the behavior and of matter. So if we are talking about it in terms epistemological, okay, a point of view, so it is empirical plus the conceptual. Okay, so in terms of the formal criteria, that is the genus plus the difference. Economics, it is the same. That is the study of how society manages these scarce resources. While the linguistics, it can also be referred to as a study of language. So it is about what is known about language and also of the method used by linguists in arriving at that knowledge. while the legal studies, in legal studies, mainly the students are introduced to the basic law concepts, principles, and the procedures. So while for the literary theory, the theory is regarded as less an account of anything than an activity, something you do or don't do. So a literary theory is regarded having the following attribute. It is interdisciplinary, analytical, and speculative, a critic of common sense, and also reflective. So if we analyze the differences of those definitions, we can see, the chemistry definition, so mainly rely on what? Okay, what is studied? Okay, so that is an objective object. While the economics, okay, studies how, that is how society manages these scarce resources. It is a kind of a behavior. So what is known about language and of the method used by the linguists in arriving at the knowledge, that is also can be classified as a what? So it is about, the objective objects, or language is something that is institutionalized. And I think it is, both, it is in the both line of the categories. So it is a fuzzy case. While for the legal studies, so it is both what and how. The legal concept, the principles. So how to, conduct, carry out the legal procedures. So that is how. Okay. So the law, that is an institutionalized object. So also, when a literary definition is defined, so it is regarded more as, account of activity than account of anything. Okay, so probably we will see it is about doing. Okay, so a literary theory is not regarded as a theory of literature. So it is regarded as a theory of nothing. So that is not available. So how to account for those differences in terms of, the specialization? So I gave this, translation device. So, I gave a 4-point scale to the ER and SR. So if, the discipline is about the objective object, so I see the epistemic relation is the strongest. So that is ER with 2 pluses. So if it is about the institutionalized object, that it is strong, but not as strong as, the discipline which is concerned with objective subject. So if it is about the behaviors, so it is quite weak. If it is, the theory doesn't mention any object in particular, so it is the weakest. So the SR, so if the definition is stipulative, the one who gives the definition, okay, is held accountable. So I see it has the strongest SR. So if the definition is about how rather than what, so still strong SR. But if the institutional interest being taken into account, I think it has the weak SR. If no agency is mentioned, it is the weakest SR. That is the subjective relation. So you can see we have a quite nice, okay, say a relative position of these 5 disciplines. So we can use a line to connect the 5 together. Okay, so that is my part. Okay, I think if we have time, we have the question and answer after the other 3 groups. Okay, so how about Professor Yuan? It's your turn. I'm going to stop the sharing.
Thank you for, let me see. Yeah, I'm sharing the screen. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yes, good. Now, welcome to our session of the LCT 3.5 China. And our session is focused is on the linguistics and the law. Okay. Also known as forensic linguistics. Well, instead of individual presentations, our session takes the form of group discussion. And our group members are Dr. SHI Chunxu from Fujian Normal University.
Hello, everyone. Yes, hello, everyone.
And Miss Youyou.
Hello, everyone.
Good.
Yeah.
And Mr. Wentao.
Hi.
Yeah, good. These are two PhD students of mine, and me, Richard Yuan, from Guangdong University of Foreign Studies. And our group discussion centers on the legitimation code theory semantics of two introductory disciplinary textbooks, namely The Study of Language by George Yu and The Introduction to the American Legal System by Skab and Sharma. And we are going to cover 3 topics or subtopics, and the contributors and contributions are like this: semantic gravity of images, that is multimodality by Dr. Shi. And secondly, a technical term presentation by Mr. Xu Wentao, and sequencing tool and epistemic semantic density by Ms. Youyou. So now let's come to the translation devices proposed by Dr. Shi. I know Dr. Shi's expertise is in multimodality, and you proposed a translation device for measuring the semantic gravity of images. So would you please show us the translation device you created, Dr. Shi?
Okay, thank you, Professor Yuan. As we all know, semantic gravity refers to the degree to which meaning relates to its context. So to explore context dependency of meanings in textbook images, we created this translation device. Based on Martin and Rose 2007, we divide images into 3 categories: abstract, metaphoric, and concrete. Under abstract images, we have taxonomized and illustrative images. Taxonomized refers to images involving classification and composition. Illustrative images concerning exemplification, such as figures with examples. And metaphoric images, there are 2 types: symbolic and non-symbolic. Symbolic refers to image has iconic meaning and in relation to text. And the last one, concrete images. And it includes 2 types, specialized and everyday. So it means images produced in everyday field and specialized fields, such as linguistics and law. Moving from SG1 to SG6, these images of different strengths of semantic gravity. The higher the semantic the strengths, the stronger, the more meaning is dependent on its context. The lower, the less.
Good. Yes, very good.
Thank you.
Have you found some similarities and differences between the 2 textbooks? As we know that in the 2 textbooks, there are some kind of pictures or images. So in terms of semantic gravity, do you find some similarities and differences?
Okay, so now let's turn to semantic gravity in textbook images. So first, let's look at the cover images. Here we can see there are 2 pictures. On the left one is the one of US Supreme Court, the symbol of American legal system. So we know that this cover image is metaphoric and symbolic. It stays at SG3. On the right side, we have the book titled The Study of Language, and it is one of pictograph, one of the written languages. So this one is concrete and specialized. It stays at SG5. It means that semantic gravity of cover images in the linguistics textbook is stronger than that in the legal textbook. Okay, next.
It's interesting, yes.
And now let's turn, yes. Now let's turn to chapter opening images. Firstly, let's come to the legal textbook. We can see here, chapter opening images in the legal textbooks are always the same. It shows the icon of balance symbolizing justice. So its semantic gravity stays at lower level, always SG1. Okay,
and how
yes.
about the linguistic textbook?
Yes, as for linguistics textbooks, according to table 1 here, its semantic gravity tends to be of different variety, ranging from SG4 to SG6. Okay, so among them, SG5 and SG6 are overwhelmingly predominant. So its SG is stronger than that in the legal textbook, which always stays as SG3.
Oh, good. Yes. And then some examples.
Yes. So yes, some examples. Here we have 3 images. Image number 1 here is for chapter The Sounds of Language. So here we can see metaphoric organs for sound production. So we know that this one is metaphoric and non-symbolic. And image number 2 is for chapter 16, written language. We can see here an ancient language or picture form. So we know it is concrete and specialized in linguistic field. And image number 3 here is for chapter 2, animals and human language. We can see here one of the chimpanzees. So we know this one is concrete and everyday. Yeah, so it means that the last one, the semantic gravity of the last one is stronger than previous 2.
Good. Yes, then what kind of conclusions can you draw?
Okay, so the analysis shows that the semantic gravity of images in the linguistics textbook tend to show more diversity, ranging from SG4 to SG6 than in the legal textbook, which always stays SG3. In particular, concrete images tend to show up frequently in the linguistics textbook, where none of them can be found in the legal textbook, only metaphoric one. So we argue that this phenomenon has something to do with different capacity of knowledge building in these 2 different educational principles. That's all for this part. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shi. Very interesting. Yeah. And then we move on to the second subtopic, that is about the technical terms presentation in the 2 textbooks. So Mr. Xu Wentao, regarding the presentation or development of technical terms in the disciplines, in the 2 disciplines, what do you find are the typical patterns of terms presentation?
Yes, thanks, Professor. There are 2 basic patterns. The first one is deductive pattern. Its generic structure is term followed by explanation. The second pattern is inductive pattern. Its generic structure is explanation followed by term. And as for each pattern, there are also some optional stages, like background, example, summary, etc. Now, let's take a look at 2 examples. The first example is about the term sovereign immunity from the textbook of law. It starts with the background, and then the term is given, and then some detailed explanation. And it ends with an example. Yes, here it is a legal case. And let's take a look at another example. It is taken from the
second example, yeah. here?
Yeah, the second example, it is taken from the textbook of linguistics. It is about term lexical relations. And this part, it starts with some background information, and then the author gives us some detailed explanation. And at the end, the term is given. So that's the two typical patterns.
Okay, so we don't have enough time, so we don't go into the details. And then the second question is about what are the typical semantic profiles or semantic waves like for each pattern you have examined?
Yes, here we just focus on the obligatory stages. For deductive pattern, at the term stage, SD is strongest, SD weakest. As it moves to the explanation stage, SD becomes weaker, SD stronger. And then for the inductive pattern, yes, for the inductive pattern with explanation, SD is weaker and SD is stronger, and then SD gradually rises to the strongest, SD falls to the weakest. But if we take all the optional stages, semantic waves for the two patterns look quite similar.
Okay.
Yes,
so just now you talked about the condensation of meanings actually through packing, unpacking, and repacking of the terms. And well, now let's talk a little bit of the clustering and constellation of meanings. So how do terms and other terms or concepts cluster or constellate in the two textbooks?
okay, to illustrate that, we built clusterings or meanings for two terms as an example. The first clustering is about the term sovereign immunity. The term is located at the center, as you can see from the figure, and this term is surrounded by some other terms, mainly some subtypes of immunity, and each of them is further associated with some other concepts. And the same pattern, the same thing happens to another term, lexical relations. From next page.
Yeah, that's the linguistics, the lexical relations.
Yeah, the same pattern happened to another term, lexical relations, from textbook of linguistics. So now I would like to draw a conclusion. Yeah, so as you can see, editors of textbooks of linguistics and the law tend to introduce a term directly with higher SD and weak SD. Besides, concepts tend to cluster around some core terms. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, yeah, and interesting. We are going to do some in-depth analysis of the two textbooks later. Okay, then we move on to the last topic concerning sequencing tool and ESD. As we know, Mayton during 2017 proposed a set of translation devices or tools such as wording, clausing, and sequencing to measure the semantic density and the condensation. So now let's focus on the sequencing tool, not the other two. So Ms. Fu, what is the sequencing tool, and then how does it help condense meanings in textbooks?
Okay, thank you, Professor. Because I will use this sequencing tool, so I first introduce it briefly. The sequencing tool aims to show the strength of epistemic semantic density at the level of discourse. The tool offers 3 levels of delicacy. The first level introduces 2 principal types, cumulative and vertical. Cumulative and segmental. The second level discusses vertical and horizontal forms of cumulative sequencing, and the sentimental and the compartmental forms, the segmental sequencing. The third line illustrates the further level of delicacy that distinguishes within each of these types. For instance, the vertical sequencing condenses meaning from one or more passages and transport those meanings into another passage, while horizontal sequencing links passages together without explicitly transporting meanings across passages. Yeah. As regarding how it condenses meaning, yeah, the table 2 and 3 shows the overall distribution of sequencing resources in the 2 textbooks I have selected. For the time limits, I have only selected 2 passages from the textbooks around 1,200 words. And I will not further illustrate this statistics. Let's move on to the vertical part. Yeah, to show the proportion of the subtypes of vertical sequencing tool. As we can see from these 2 pie charts, both of the textbooks have similar proportion of vertical sequencing, but when it comes to the horizontal sequencing, we can observe that the proportion of vertical type in the legal textbook is much higher than that in the linguistic textbook, and for the compartmental part, the legal textbook has less proportion. So so generally speaking, yeah, we can see that the nominalization as a form of grammatical metaphor does not appear in sequencing in this data set. The proform only plays a referential role and cannot form a stable terminology system. And the cover terms as temporary terms cannot be used to construct a terminology system. And the following are 2 examples of the vertical sequencing from the passages. So I will draw a brief conclusion now. The analysis shows that in both textbooks, the proportion of vertical sequencing is very low. It can only increase the semantic density of discourse to a certain extent. The horizontal sequencing has a high proportion in legal textbook, clearly indicating the semantic relationships such as counter-expectancy, and increasing the semantic density within passages. The compartmental type accounts for over 60% and plays a major role in linguistic textbook, but it can only display vague semantic relationship between sentences. So a linguistic textbook can only form a cumulative hierarchical semantic structure to a certain extent, and it shows a strong compartmental knowledge structure. For the legal textbook, it displays a stronger condensation capacity with higher knowledge structure than linguistic textbook from the perspective of sequencing. Yeah, so as we can see from the picture. Yeah. Thank you.
So thank you. Well, because we just have 20 minutes, so our panel discussion is on the high flat line without unpacking the LCT terminology here. Because we assume that the audience is aware of the semantics of these things, but we have illustrated that the ESG of images and the figures, not figures here, but plays an important role in disciplinary knowledge building. And secondly, the representation and the reproduction of the legal terms does show different condensation and the constellation of meanings from the linguistic terms. And finally, the sequencing tools are useful to differentiate the ESD in different disciplinary discourses. Well, that's all for our presentation for this discussion. Thank you. Thank you for your attention. Now let's
Thank you.
give the floor
Thank you,
to
Professor Yuan.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
so,
you.
yeah, just the time. Okay, thank you. You know, it is much harder to coordinate 4 speakers within 20 minutes.
Yeah,
Okay, so would you mind stopping?
Yes.
Stopping the sharing.
Stop.
So Dongbing, so please get ready for your part. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mus, and the topic for my presentation today is epistemic relations in economics and linguistics, legitimizing objective study and approaches in introductory textbooks. Just to warn you, this is a work in progress, so a lot of the things I'm going to say might change. Okay. All right. I'm going to divide my presentation into 3 parts: foundations, questions and data, and findings. To compare the objective study and approaches between linguistics and economics, I'm going to draw on the tool of insights. 1 second. All right, so the epistemic plane, which makes the distinction between ontological relations and discursive relations. So ontological relations between knowledge and its object of study, and discursive relations between knowledge and other knowledges. So for ontological relations, we're looking at how strongly knowledge practices found and control legitimate objects of study. And for discursive relations, we're looking at legitimate procedures for constructing object of study. And we'll end up with 4 modalities of insights. So situational insights, purist insights, doctrinal insights, and knower insights. To put them in simple words, so for situational insights, we've got practice foregrounding phenomenon, situation determines approaches, and for purist insight, we've got practice based on established principles and associated procedures. And for doctrinal insights, we've got practices foregrounding procedural method, irrespective of phenomenon. And then for knower insight, we're looking at approaches, practices that are characterized by no clear phenomenon and all approaches. And of course, this is borrowed from Wolf's study. All right, so there's a bit of a discussion about economics and linguistics in knowledge and knowers. So both linguistics and economics are considered as exhibiting stronger epistemic relations in the book. Knowledge and knowers also looks closely at what's going on in the respective fields. So the conflicts within each field are characterized in terms of epistemic relations clash. So for economics, there's a clash between heterodox approaches to economics and orthodox approaches to epistemics, orthodox approaches to economics. So orthodox economics is characterized by doctrinal insight, which means it's specialized by its approaches. So the orthodox economics believe in the value of mathematical modeling, and they claim knowledge of ever-widening areas of social life. So we've got a stronger discursive relations and weaker ontological relations. In contrast, heterodox economics is characterized by situational insight. So it's specialized by its problem situation. And these economists, they argue for greater diversity in theories and methods, and they typically foreground the problems that are being addressed. So we've got stronger discursive relations, weaker discursive relations and stronger ontological relations. There's also epistemic relations clash going on within linguistics, and knowledge and knowers discuss 2 approaches in linguistics. So one is transformational generative grammar and the other is systemic functional linguistics. So TG grammar is characterized by doctrinal insight. So it's specialized by its approaches. The TG grammar emphasize theory. So it's theory driven. We've got stronger discursive relations. They use made up examples. So we've got weaker ontological relations. SFL is different. It's characterized by situational insight. So it's specialized by its problem situation. So SFL encourages interdisciplinary collaboration. So we've got weaker discursive relation, and SFL put great emphasis on text. So we've got stronger ontological relations. We can map these clashes on the epistemic relations plane, and we see a clash between situational insight and doctrinal insight within these disciplines. So this is the findings from knowledge and knowers. So for knowledge and knowers, they're looking at data from field of production and field of recontextualization. So for our study, we're going to focus on field of recontextualization because we're going to look at two textbooks. So one is Principles of Economics, and the other is the Study of Language. And we're using these two textbooks in our two undergraduate courses we're running at University of International Business and Economics. And they are both introductory courses. So the question I'm asking is, how do the textbooks introduce the legitimate objects of study and approaches in their respective fields? And what are the similarities and differences? The data I'm looking at for Principles of Economics is the introductory chapters, because the introductory chapters introduce the object of study and methodology used in the field of economics. And for the study of language, I'll be looking at key sections across chapters because the book doesn't have specific chapters on object of study and methodology. Okay, let's take a look at economics. So in the first chapter of the textbook, it introduces the basic principles of economics. And the book goes, economics is the study of how society manages its scarce resources. And then it also says that economists study how people interact with one another, and economists analyze the forces and trends that affect the economy as a whole. So we've got a broader phenomenon we're looking at in economics. And the author of the textbook also draws on a number of instances we might encounter in our daily life. For example, how we allocate our time, how we decide to spend our income, and also decisions about going to college, watching a movie, and also bigger phenomena like public policy and differences in living standards across countries. So quite an array of phenomenon can be accounted for in economics through very basic principles. So the textbook is saying that we can account for these phenomena based on these very simple principles. And the textbook actually say it very explicitly. So the textbook says the field of economics is based on a few big ideas that can be applied in many different situations. So we see weaker emphasis on phenomenon. So we've got weaker ontic relations. And in the second chapter, the textbook introduces the methodology that is used by economists. And the textbook emphasizes that the methodology used by economists is quite objective. So economists try to address their subject with a scientist's subjectivity. So the activities involved are devising theories, collecting data, and then analyzing these data to verify or refute their theories. The textbook also legitimized this observation theory and more observation method by drawing on how these methods are used in natural sciences. So here the author is making a comparison between the way the economists do research with the way astronomers and biologists do research, in contrast to the way the physicists do their research. So the interplay between theory and observation also occurs in economics. And economists, like astronomers and evolutionary biologists, usually have to make do with whatever data the world gives them. So they draw on data from the real world, which is different from how physicists obtain their data in laboratories. Okay. All right, and the textbook also emphasizes the use of assumptions. So economists make assumptions and they understand a very complex world with simplified imaginary world, so based on very simple assumptions. So they might assume things like the world consists of only 2 countries and that each country produces only 2 goods, right? And it's a very simple assumption. And then you understand the real world based on this very simple assumption. So this assumption is the basis for the economic models. So economists also use models to learn about the world. If we briefly summarize the methodology section, then we can see that, the textbook emphasizes observation, theorizing, making assumptions, and building models as legitimate approaches to data. The textbook also legitimizes the approaches by reference to their use in natural sciences, such as physics, biology, and astronomy. So we can see a stronger discursive relations. So if we place the textbook principles of economics on the epistemic relations plane, then we can see that it is characterized by a doctrinal insight. Let's take a look at linguistics. At the beginning of the textbook, in the preface, it says, in the study of language, I have tried to present a comprehensive survey of what is known about language and also of the methods used by linguists in arriving at that knowledge. So we've got objective study, which is language, and we've got a number of methods that we can use to study language. And of course, the objective study is defined quite clearly in the textbook when the textbook talks about the defining feature of language, which makes it different from other forms of communication, for example, animal communication. So these features are specific to language, which is the objective study of the field. So we can see a stronger ontic relation. I'm going to talk about the methodologies by dividing the chapters into chapters on sounding, chapters on wording, and chapters on meaning, borrowing Halliday's way of talking about language. So the chapters on sounding, which are about phonetics and phonology, we can see that we've got a quite clear objective study. So for phonetics, we're looking at speech segments, for phonetics. And then for phonology, we're looking at systems and patterns of speech sounds. So we've got stronger ontic relation, emphasizing the phenomenon. And then we've got specific ways of looking at phenomenon in phonetics and phonology. So for phonetics, we might use things like manner and place of articulation to identify the speech sounds and study them. And for phonology, we might use things like methods like distinctive features and minimal pairs to talk about patterns in sound system. So we can see that for these sub-areas, subfields of linguistics, we have stronger discursive relations, as well as stronger ontic relations. Now, if we look at the pattern, the chapters on wording, there's a bit of a difference in the pattern. So for chapters on word formation, morphology, and syntax, we can see stronger discursive relations. So for word formation, for example, we've got a list of ways that we can talk about word formation, so how words are formed. And we have specific categories to talk about the way words are formed in languages, across languages. And then for morphology, we're looking at particular types of morphemes, for example, and then we can make distinctions between morphemes and allomorphs. For the chapter on syntax, the textbook focuses on generative grammar. So basically what is being looked at is how we can read tree diagram, how we can talk about surface structure and deep structure. So that's a legitimate way of doing syntax. So we've got stronger discursive relations for these three chapters. But the chapter on grammar is different from the other ones. So for grammar, we've got traditional grammar. We've got prescriptive and descriptive approaches to grammar. And within descriptive approach, we've also got different schools of doing grammar. So we can see that, you don't necessarily have a single way of doing grammar. You've got multiple ways. So we have weaker discursive relations here. And all these chapters have very specific objects of study. So we can say that they feature stronger ontic relations. Now the pattern is again different for the chapters on meaning. So we've got chapters on semantic, pragmatics, and discourse analysis. So all these three chapters look at meaning, but look at meaning in different sense, so different types of meaning. And for each chapter, the textbook introduces a number of approaches that we can take to study these different types of meaning. So we can see that for these chapters, or these subfields of linguistics, the textbook is showing different epistemic relations, different insights. So they have stronger ontic relations and weaker discursive relations. They feature these relations. So if we map, if we place the study of language on the epistemic relations plane, then we can say that the study of language, the textbook is characterized by a situational insight, because for different phenomenon, different aspects of language, we might use different methodology or approaches. So for students specializing in business English, because they need to take both courses for their study, then they might experience shift between the two insights. So shift between situational insight and doctrinal insight when they read the textbooks. And also within the discipline of linguistics, the students might also experience insight shift. So when they study things like sections on phonetics, phonology, word formation, morphology, and syntax, they might think that, okay, there's one way, a legitimate way of doing phonetics, phonology, and so on. But when it comes to the chapters on grammar, semantics, and pragmatics, then we've got multiple ways that you can do these studies. So this student studying linguistics using this textbook might also experience a particular kind of insight shift. As I said, this is a work in progress, so we've still got a lot of things to do. For example, we need to design translation device to analyze the data in detail. And also we need to interview students so that we can actually see whether they experience these different shifts, insight shifts in their study. Okay, these are my references. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dongbing, for saving us 3 minutes. Okay, so the last presentation will be Zhigang, but we have to play the video pre-recorded. Okay, we can start.
Hi, everyone. Okay, and I'll put Zhigang's email in the chat box in case anyone wants to get in touch.
Hi, everyone. My name is Zhigang. I'm from Beijing Institute of Technology.
The sound is a little bit low. Can you make it louder?
Okay, let me try again.
Hi, everyone. My name is Zhigang.
Great.
I'm from
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Cool.
Beijing Institute of Technology. First of all, I would like to apologize to all of you that I can't be with you at the moment, and I have to do this presentation in a form pre-recording. If you are interested in my work after this presentation, you're very welcome to write to me if you have any questions. The title of my presentation is Building the Knowledge of Structure in Linguistics and Chemistry Through Academic Formalisms, True Diagrams versus Structural Formulas. This talk includes 4 parts: introduction, theoretical tools, data, the knowledge building of the structure, and comparison. First of all, a brief introduction. As we all know, the concept of structure is important for both linguistics and chemistry. For linguistics, almost all levels of language involve structure. For example, phonological structures, morphological structures, syntactic structures, semantic structures, and so on. All this show that structure is pretty important for linguistics. For chemistry, structure is also a core component of chemistry knowledge. Chemistry is the study of properties and behavior matter. Structural matter is very important because it determines most properties and behavior matter. This is also shown by the fact that chemistry discipline is fused with terminologies about structure, such as molecular structures, atomic structures, electronic structures, and crystal structures. Since structure is so important for both linguistics and chemistry, we need to ask, how do the two disciplines build the knowledge of structure? To make sure this question is approachable, I focus on syntactic structure in linguistics and molecular structure in chemistry. There are 2 reasons for this. One is that they are important parts of the two disciplines, and the other is that both tend to use academic formalisms to build the knowledge. For example, linguistics use tree diagrams to build the knowledge of syntactic structure. You can see that these are pages from a chapter about syntax in a general linguistic textbooks that are fused with tree diagrams. On the other hand, chemistry uses structure formulas to build the knowledge of molecular structure. This is a page from the high school chemistry textbook, which is full of structure formulas. The above shows that the two academic formalisms are important knowledge builders of structure for the two disciplines. So, to understand the similarities and differences in the knowledge building of structure between the two linguistics and chemistry, it is necessary to explore how the two academic formalisms work and build knowledge. So we need to ask, how do the two academic formalisms build the knowledge of structure in the two disciplines? And what does it inform about the similarities and the differences between the two disciplinary knowledges? Next, I move on to the theoretical tools, the theoretical foundation of this study. Like many studies, this work uses both LCT and SFL. In terms of LCT, I use semantics. I believe you all know about semantic gravity and semantic density, and there's no need to introduce them in detail. In terms of SFL, I use field. This is the most recent field network developed by Dorian and Martin. For this work, I mainly use three field categories: classification, composition, and property. Classification taxonomies refer to the relation between items in terms of classes and subclasses. For example, in this sentence, phrases include noun phrases and verb phrases. The word phrases is a class, and noun phrases and verb phrases are subclasses. On the other hand, composition taxonomies refer to part-whole relations among items. For example, in this sentence, a sentence can be composed of a noun phrase and a verb phrase. The word sentence is the whole, and the noun phrase and the verb phrase are the parts. The last field category used in this study is property. Dorian and Martin define property as a potential gradable qualities or positions that often enable rich description of phenomenon. One particular subtype of property used to analyze the tree diagrams and structure formulas is spatial properties. For example, in this sentence, the underlying phrase construes a spatial property, specifying the relative positions of electrons and the nucleus. Next is about my data. I focus on the two academic formalisms used in introductory linguistics and chemistry textbooks. For linguistics, I use the general linguistic textbooks entitled The Study of Language, written by Youyou, and for chemistry, I use Pearson Chemistry New South Wales textbooks for year 12. Next, I'll focus on the knowledge building of structure by the two academic formalisms. First, how tree diagrams build the knowledge of syntactic structures in linguistics. To understand the knowledge building of syntactic structure through tree diagrams, we first need to understand how tree diagrams work. This is a tree diagram for the sentence, "A dog followed the boy." In linguistics, this sentence is called surface structure. This underlying abstract levels composed of different syntactic elements are called syntactic structures. These abbreviations represent the different syntactic elements. Our analysis shows that one particular feature of the knowledge building of syntactic structure through diagrams is that they can build the breadth of composition taxonomies through horizontal iteration of syntactic elements. As you can see, the branches of the tree diagrams increased from the left to the right, which means the compositional syntactic elements increase for the tree diagrams. In terms of field, this builds the breadth of composition taxonomy. Building the breadth of composition taxonomy means that there are more syntactic elements at one hierarchy, which in turn suggests that the syntactic structure is more complex and has stronger semantic density. In addition to building the knowledge of syntactic structure by building the breadth of composition taxonomies, tree diagrams can also build the depth of composition taxonomies through vertical iteration of syntactic elements. For example, as you can see, the hierarchies of the tree diagrams can increase from the left to the right, building deeper and deeper composition taxonomies. Building the depth of composition taxonomy means more syntactic hierarchies in a tree diagram, which in turn suggests that syntactic structure is more complex and has stronger semantic density. In addition to classification and composition taxonomies, tree diagrams also construe a spatial property, that is, the ordering of lexical items and syntactic elements. This property is very important for syntactic structure as it specifies the sequence of syntactic elements, which is core for syntactic structure. Another special feature of tree diagrams, which is also important for knowledge building, is that it enables the movement between abstract concepts and empirical data. As introduced earlier, surface structure is the concrete sentences while deep structure is abstract levels of structural organization. Many different surface structures can share one same deep structure, which means the surface structure has a stronger semantic gravity than deep structure, and there is a shift of semantic gravity within the tree diagram. To sum up, to build the knowledge of syntactic structures, tree diagrams build the breadth and depth of composition taxonomies through horizontal and vertical iteration of syntactic elements, and enable the movement between syntactic rules and concrete sentences. Also, very importantly, tree diagrams realize a spatial property of ordering of lexical items and syntactic elements, specifying sequence of the syntactic elements, which is core for syntactic structure. Now, we finish the analysis of knowledge building of syntactic structure through tree diagrams. Next, let me move on to the knowledge building of molecule structures through structural formulas. To understand the knowledge building of molecule structures through tree diagram, through structural formulas, we first need to understand how structural formulas work. This is a structure formula for water molecules. These letters represent atoms, O for oxygen atoms and H for hydrogen atoms. These lines represent covalent bonds, which are in fact pairs of shared electrons. Our analysis shows that structural formulas build the knowledge of molecule structure through several strategies. One is that they build the breadth of classification taxonomies through iteration of chemical symbols and the connectors. By connectors, I mean these lines. These lines are called connectors, and chemical symbols are these letters. These different chemical symbols represent different types of non-molecular atoms. The more different chemical symbols a structural formula has, the broader its classification taxonomies. Besides, structural formulas also build classification taxonomies of covalent bonds. For example, the single line and the triple lines represent single covalent bonds and triple covalent bonds respectively. These bonds are subtypes of covalent bonds. Building the breadth of classification taxonomies means more different atoms and bonding relations between them in a molecule, which in turn suggests a more complex molecule structure, and the molecule structure has stronger semantic density. In addition to building the breadth of classification taxonomy, structural formulas can also build the breadth of composition taxonomies through horizontal and vertical iteration of chemical symbols and connectors. For example, these three structural formulas represent methane molecules, ethane molecules, and polyethylene molecules. Chemical symbols and connectors iterate on a horizontal direction and build the breadth of composition taxonomies. On the other hand, chemical symbols and connectors can also iterate on the vertical direction and build the breadth of composition taxonomies. For example, the carbon symbols iterate on the vertical direction in this structure formula, and this structure formula represents a more broad molecule structure. So building the breadth of composition taxonomy through both horizontal and vertical iteration of chemical symbols and connectors allow the molecule structures to be indefinitely large and show as many boundary relation between atoms as possible, which means the molecule structure is more complex and has stronger semantic density. In addition, structure formula can also build spatial properties through spatial arrangement of chemical symbols. They can represent one-dimensional molecule structures, two-dimensional molecule structures, and three-dimensional molecule structures. Here note that this dashed wedge represents a covalent bond behind the plain and beige, and this solid wedge represents a covalent bond out of the plane of page. These different geometries are particular types of spatial properties construed by structural formulas. In terms of semantic gravity, although structural formulas are highly context-independent, there can be variations. These are three different structural formulas of the same molecule method. They show varying representation of the geometry of method molecules, with the left one being least similar to the real molecule structure and the right one being the most similar. We argue that from the left to the right, the semantic gravity becomes stronger. Our criteria for measuring this is the degree of articulation away from the physical present. That is, the closer to the real thing, the stronger the semantic density. So the structural formula on the right has a stronger semantic gravity on the left ones. To sum up, to build the knowledge of syntax structure, molecule structures, structural formulas build a breadth of classification taxonomies through iteration of chemical symbols and connectors. The breadth of composition taxonomies through horizontal and vertical iteration of chemical symbols and connectors, and allow variations in semantic gravity in terms of how close the representation is to real molecule structures. Also, what is very important for structural formulas is that they can organize spatial property through spatial arrangement of chemical symbols, which is core to molecule structure. Now we have finished analyzing knowledge building of structure through the two academic formalisms. We are able to compare them and see what we can find. If we compare the knowledge building of structure in terms of field, we can see that tree diagrams focus on building both breadth and depth of composition taxonomies, while structure formulas build breadth of classification and composition taxonomies. Both tree diagrams and structure formulas realize spatial property, but tree diagrams organize spatial property in one dimension, while structure formulas in all the three dimensions. Such difference in building the knowledge of structure has something to do with the disciplinary affordance of the two academic formalisms. In linguistics, syntax structure emphasizes the breadth of compositional syntactic elements, hierarchical relations between the elements at different levels, and their ordering in a linear structure. Molecular structures, on the other hand, emphasize the classification of compositional atoms and boundary relation between them. The breadth of compositional atoms in the molecule and their arrangement in space. From the perspective of semantic gravity, the two academic formalisms show different features. Tree diagrams enable a shift of semantic gravity within themselves, that is, the movement between syntactic rules and concrete sentences. On the contrary, structure formulas do not enable such shift within themselves, and are generally quite context-independent, but they also show some form of variation in semantic gravity in terms of how close their representation is to real molecule structures. So, what does this inform about the similarity and differences between the two disciplinary knowledge? The knowledge building analysis shows that they are similar, that they both focus on structure, but linguistics emphasize the breadth and depth of compositions and their ordering in a linear structure, while chemistry emphasizes the breadth of compositions and their boundary relations and spatial arrangement. These differences are related to different objects of study between the two disciplines. That is, linguistics study language while chemistry studies matter. In LCT terms, they may have different ontological relations, which are made manifestly in this study in terms of how the two disciplinary knowledge of structure is built. That's all for my presentation. Comments welcome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Zhigang. So, we have about 15 minutes for suggestions, comments, and any other questions. So any questions to our panel session? Okay.
Thanks very much. That was very, very interesting. And the whole panel has done some really impressive work to characterize the different disciplines, looking at the semiotic affordances of the different textbooks. So I really appreciated it. And
thank you.
The sort of fine-grained nature of the work is wonderful. My question is sort of on the big picture altogether. And so I suppose anyone from the panel could answer it. And that would be, how do you hope that this sort of mapping of the different disciplines is going to assist Chinese students who are studying in these particular disciplines to be able to identify the differences between them? Do you have plans in that direction, or plans of how this could be fed into teaching or resources for students?
Okay, so I'm going to answer your question first. So the other members can, if I didn't make it clear, so they can add their opinions to your questions. So yes, I just, at the very beginning of this session, I introduced the background of this, project. So, the call for new liberal arts, and also as summarized by Metin, knowledge must be brought together, as the research challenges are often described as wicked problems that require interdisciplinary collaboration to resolve. So, our argument is that, knowing it before or prioritize or precedes the doing. So if you can adopt the pedagogical design that helps the students, who are learning the different disciplines to achieve the effect, we summarize as 1 + 1 larger than 2. So we need to know, to understand, the features of each, disciplinary knowledge. So that leads to account for our comparison of different, disciplines. So the bridging one is the linguistics, as all of us, had a degree in linguistics. So that is the field we are familiar with. So we want to compare linguistics with literary theory, the study of law, and also the economics and the chemistry. So as long as we gain a quite comprehensive understanding of the differences or the disciplinary differences in terms of the following aspects of knowledge construction or the knowledge building. One is object of study and approaches. The other is the theory building and the development. And third one is discursive presentation. And the last one is the newer concern. So, if we can get a good summary of those differences, I mean, probably we can see that it's a disciplinary variation, okay, in different disciplines. So that will help us, okay, to have, the most efficient pedagogical design that can help the students, who are, studying the different plans, the different disciplines to achieve the thing as mentioned simply bring together diverse knowledges is not enough. So what is the next step we need to take, okay, to answer this research gap if it is not enough, okay? So what do we need to do, okay, to make the studying of different disciplines worthwhile or fruitful, okay? So the combination or the integration of different knowledge practices can facilitate, can equip the students with a much stronger intellectual tool in solving the problem they are going to face, in the society or in their future work. So the larger map, okay. So the finding we reported here, just at the quite early stage of our collaboration, in making comparison of the different disciplines. So our next step is to continue the comparison, with reference or in terms of the aspects of the knowledge building. So if we have this map, okay, as you mentioned, so we think, when we design the curriculum or the teaching methodology, so we can consciously, we will, not can, consciously, take those differences into consideration. So we want to help our students and want to achieve the ideal goal of the integrative learning. So how about the other members? So you can, give your, opinions into the question raised by Ian. Okay, thank you.
I might jump in if no one's got a comment. I was just thinking about this in terms of the perspective we're taking. So for now, personally, I feel we're more taking a top-down perspective. So we've got this policy and call from the Ministry of Education, and we do this analysis so that we can better design the curriculum and so on. But I think we also lack data from the students' perspective, so more bottom-up. So how we're assuming a lot of problems, but we don't necessarily know that students are really experiencing these problems, or they are struggling, but they're not really conscious about what's going on. So it's also an empirical issue that we need to think about and complement the things we're doing here, I guess. Yeah.
Yes, I agree with Dongbing here. Yes, we need to take the students, the learners' perspectives, and
yeah, that is a knowers concern.
The knowers, yes, and so we need to do some interviews, to do some kind of with the students to see whether they find it difficult or something. Well, we imagine that these are difficult for the students, like the different approaches or different patterns of presenting terms, to say, but maybe the students find it easier, not too difficult. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, we need to do some more work.
Can I have it? Who'd like to?
Sorry. Okay. Yeah, so how about the members of our group? Any addition? So Ian, so do we answer your question? So
I think so, yes.
Okay,
thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, it's Lee here. that I really enjoyed how systematic the studies were and so clearly displayed. And this whole move to arts, liberal arts education is really exciting. And I think that, you know, your team have got some really important things to share and to say. And I really wish you well with this project. It's going to be very, very interesting to see, you know, how you take this forward, and just all the best, because it's pretty radical.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we will work on it. Okay. Okay, thank you, Lee. So I think it is about the time. So the other group probably queue up, okay, for their talks. Okay, if no more questions or comments, so that's all for LCT 3.5 China. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you so much,
Well
guys.
done, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then the next session will start at 11.
Okay. Billy.
LCT has had a huge impact on me. My journey through my master's in education proved to be quite transformative, especially coming from an engineering background. I saw the world with new eyes, kind of like being unplugged from the matrix in a way.
LCT has changed the way I view the world because it has given me tools to think about problems that arise in my life as a teacher, in my life as a parent, in my life as just a human being, how to look at those in ways that move past simple binaries of right and wrong, good and bad. They've allowed me to think about how code clashes could be at the root of disagreements.
For me, LCT have helped, especially with the semantic wave. It helps me to think about how I explain concepts to students.
LCT, both semantics and specialization, has really helped to refine the spaces between what used to be seen as binaries. I mean, using these dimensions, you can now literally plot a journey from abstract to concrete, or fixed to open approaches to something, or from novice to expert.
LCT has changed the way I look at things, because now I look at organizing principles.
I think that LCT is a powerful way to understand data, insofar as my research goes, but it's also a useful way to understand the social world more generally. For instance, many current topical issues I now understand not as, you know, situations of people being wrong or right, but actually I understand conflict or failure as the product of, for example, code clashes.
It really helps